All right. So, hello, everyone. This is Greg Saluti with Next Phase Rugby. Just thank you all for joining. And thank you to USA Youth and High School Rugby for asking us to host this event. Before we get going, just want to kind of talk about the purpose of this webinar. We know there are a lot of new players and parents out there that are new to the sport of rugby, and that number is growing every day. The collegiate rugby landscape is tough enough to navigate. So if you joined us last quarter, we had a webinar discussing the overall really the landscape of college rugby, and you'd have heard us discuss the types of teams there are, the multiple governing bodies, divisions, things like that. We really only touched on NCAA women's rugby. So in this webinar, we really want to take you on a deeper dive into the complexities of NCAA rugby. So hopefully this, will help you with your preparation and make your journey from high school to college just a little bit easier. So let's go with our agenda for today. All right. So first, we're going to go with some introductions. Then we're going to give a little bit of overview of NIRA as well as the competition levels. Then we are going to talk about some of the recruiting rules and regulations in the NCAA, some student athlete essentials. We are going to touch on college rugby programs, the different types there are. We are also going to go over some financial incentives. And then lastly, finding the right fit. What's the right fit for some of the student athletes? So give me one quick second. I don't know why this isn't working. All right, so let's start with some introductions. So again, I'm Greg Saluti, co-founder and president of Next Phase Rugby. If you're not familiar with Next Phase Rugby, we are a rugby recruiting website and app that connects high school rugby players from across the United States with collegiate rugby programs in the United States. So since our inception, we've grown to over 2,000 registered high school athletes that are utilizing our platform, and we have over 400 collegiate rugby programs that span all divisions, both men and women. Personally, I played rugby for over 30 years, started in college, then men's club. I even crossed codes and played 13 years on the USA Rugby League national team. I'm also a rugby coach. I founded Berks County Rugby in 2016 when my two boys, who were in 5th and 7th grade at the time, said they wanted to play. And they're both playing rugby still today. One is James. He's my oldest. He's a senior at Mount St. Mary's in Maryland, and he's also monitoring our chat today. And then I also have Jacob, who is a sophomore at Kutztown, and they're both centers. I get the pleasure of watching them line up across from each other in Rugby East matches, which is really cool. I also have a 9-year-old daughter, Anna, who I'm diligently working on to get playing rugby. She's fighting it right now, but we're going to keep working on it, and we'll see if we can get her on the pitch as well. So with that, Alex, I'm going to pass it to you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Alex Goff. I'm editor of Golf Rugby Report. We're sponsoring this webinar, and I'm a co-founder of Next Phase Rugby. I've been involved in the game my entire life. That's it's not an exaggeration. My earliest memories are watching my brothers play when I was very young, just old enough to walk. I learned my rugby in England and played in college, not particularly well. But I've been editor of Golf Rugby Report or something like it for over 25 years. So back when Coach Potvin Fulford and Coach Reed were playing, I was reporting on it. I done some coaching as well, which sort of helps me also continue to sort of understand the player viewpoint. And I coached a girls team, the Bud Bay Steelheads in Olympia, Washington for 7 years, produced several top-level players, including Kelsey Stockert, who played for the USA on 7s and 15s. And I currently coach the freshmen at St. Ignatius Boys High School in Cleveland, Ohio.
Awesome. So, Alex, if you could introduce our special guest for us.
And I'm delighted to introduce, first of all, Michelle Reed from Sacred Hearts. Michelle, Coach Reed is from Zion, Illinois, and played rugby at Eastern Illinois, which went varsity while she was there. And in 2000, she helped lead EIU to a 5th-place national finish. And she holds a BA in psychology from EIU and an MS in physical education and sports administration from Eastern Illinois as well, which she earned in 2002. Coach Reed was assistant coach at Quinnipiac in NIRA before taking on Sacred Heart head coaching job in 2015. And this past fall, she led SHU to their best season ever, going 5-1 in the regular NIRA season and making the NIRA D1 semifinals, where they bowed out to the eventual champions Harvard. They followed that up with a very successful 7th spring, culminating in a plate win at the CRAA Women's Sevens Championships. Sacred Heart University is a private Catholic university in Fairfield, Connecticut, with business, nursing, and biomedical fields being prominent in the many majors they offer. Actually, Potvin Fulford was a hockey player who converted to rugby at Norwich University during their heyday in the late aughts and into 2011. I remember seeing her play at the Sevens Championships back in 2011, a million years ago. She holds a BA in International Studies and Secondary Education and also a master's degree. She went on to play for the Portland Women's Club in a variety of positions. And actually, you claim you played fullback and prop, so I think we're going to go with that. I'm skeptical.
All true.
Yeah, all true. Coach Potvin Fulford taught French, Spanish, and social studies in Biddeford, Maine, and coached several sports before becoming the founding head coach of the University of New England's club team for 4 years. And then when they went NCAA varsity, she coached that team and has coached it ever since, leading the Nor'easters to NIRA's Tier 2 championship. And then when the competition split along more strict NCAA divisional lines, she led UNE to the D3 final in every one of the last 3 seasons of competition. And UNE is a private research university with campuses in Portland, Maine, and also Coach Potvin Fulford's hometown of Biddeford, which is, with health, biology-related programs, including nursing, biomed, health sciences, dentistry, marine biology, and kinesiology is a big part of their curriculum.
Awesome. Well, welcome both of you. Thank you for joining. One thing I forgot to mention as we're opening up questions. If you have questions as we go along, we're going to pause to take those questions. We'll have the chat monitored. So enter any questions you have into the chat so we can address them. And if everyone can just remain on mute throughout, that would be helpful. Thank you. All right, Alex, let's go on to NIRA. Why don't you give us an overview?
Well, what's NIRA? NIRA is the competition for NCAA varsity programs. If you are an NCAA program and you want to play other NCAA programs, you're in NIRA, National Intercollegiate Rugby Association. It brings together some really impressive higher institutions of higher education. Most of them are in the Northeast, spreading a little bit further south down the Eastern Seaboard. And recently, Lindenwood University is joining that, so that's very exciting. They play within their division, not exclusively. Like you can play a regular season. If you're a Division I team, you can play a Division II team. You can play a Division III team, but that would be sort of out of conference. And then they hold championships in the fall. So they play their entire 15s league within the fall. The important part of this is NIRA. The organization exists to continue to grow this group of teams so that we can get to sort of a magic number where the NCAA comes in and starts paying for everything, which is really nice when they do that.
And we'll move on to the teams.
Yeah, so here are your teams as of now. You look at Division I is the largest division, but all of these divisions are growing. And you see in Division I, Army, Brown, Dartmouth, Harvard, Lindenwood joining this coming fall, Long Island University, Mount St. Mary's, Naval Academy, Princeton, Queen's University, Charlotte, Quinnipiac, and Sacred Heart. Then Division II, AIC, Davenport, Emory and Henry, Frostburg, Newbury, New Haven, Westchester. And then Division III, Bowdoin, Castleton, Guilford, University of New England, and Warren Wilson, which is a relatively new program. And then we see there are 2 programs we have listed that we know for sure, that we can say for sure we're not speaking out of turn, are joining in 2025 in LaSalle and Thomas College. Coach Pofford Fulford would be very happy to see another team from Maine come in. But that's where it is. There are other teams that are, I would say, and we potentially talk about that, but there are other teams that are like NCAA if they check one or two boxes. And I can give you an example. Central Washington is essentially NCAA. The problem is they don't have anybody else to play on the West Coast. That's why they're not in NIRA. But if NIRA moved to the West Coast, and you saw kind of one video I made, I put in a big push to do that, they could become NCAA, NIRA very, very quickly. So that's sort of a snapshot of the schools we're talking about. And these are fantastic institutions of higher learning for sure.
Excellent. Thank you, Alex. All right, so let's get into some of the recruiting rules and regulations in the NCAA. So it's extremely important for, not only schools, but also for athletes really to understand the recruiting rules and regulations when it comes to the NCAA. So Michelle, kind of big picture, what do you see as the biggest difference for athletes that are looking at, an NCAA women's rugby program as opposed to, let's say, a varsity rugby program somewhere?
So for us, when we're recruiting, at the D1 level, we're going to have a little bit stricter rules like you're speaking of. And a few of those for us are, I will not be able to speak to a prospective student athlete until the June 15th after their sophomore year going into their junior year. I can speak to them through email or phone call. And then August 1st of that same year, I can start having face-to-face communication with them. So we have a little bit buffer for them in the beginning of their high school career so that they can, not be inundated by us constantly, at their DMs or whatever it may be. So we have that 2 years that we can start to talk to them and really talk about our university and whatnot and get them committed in that time. So you have, when you're at an institution or when you're at a tournament, one of these other rules for us is that you can't have contact with a prospective student athlete until after that day has ended and they've been released from their team. That is put in place so that we're not interrupting their competition. They are there to play rugby. They are there to be a part of that team. So after that team is done, we can have those conversations with them. We are limited on how many contacts we can have during the academic year. During the academic year, we can have 3 face-to-face off-campus contacts and 4 evaluations. During the summer, there is no limit on contact or evals.
Got it. Okay, that's some. Yeah, Ashley, I was going to say, what are you seeing?
Yeah. So first of all, I have this awesome NCAA recruiting cheat sheet that I'll be happy to send to both you, Greg, and Alex. But one clarification that I wanted to make is that group of teams that Alex showed. So all of the teams that are within NIRA, whether you're Division 1, 2, or 3, the commonality that we all share is that all of those teams abide by NCAA rules and regulations, just like our athletic department counterparts in soccer, ice hockey, etc. So that is our common thread. And I think that Coach Reed will agree with me that sometimes those NCAA compliance rules can be a little bit frustrating, but I think the important thing to remember is that the majority of those compliance rules and regs are in place to protect the student athlete so that you can do your athleting, so that you can be a student. And so on the Division 3 side for recruiting, we do have a lot more wiggle room in terms of sending out recruiting materials, electronic communication, phone calls. We can do that at any time that we want to. Off-campus meetups, we cannot meet with anybody off campus until the completion of sophomore year. And the same thing as Coach Reed said, the end of that competition day. So if you are competing in a tournament, likely NCAA coaches cannot talk to you until you're finished with that day's competition. So if a coach really wants to talk to you and you're perhaps done at 3 p.m. at NAI, they might go ahead and wait until the end of your day to chat with you. But I just wanted to kind of point out that that's one thing that all of our teams within NIRA have in common, but also kind of the reason why those NCAA rules and regs are in place is to protect the student athlete.
Greg, if I can jump in there, just I was thinking NAI exactly, Coach, because that's coming up next week, and for the Division I schools, you can't even talk to them. You can't talk to a rising junior, Coach Reed. You can't talk to a rising junior because it's before August 1st.
Right.
So if you're a player playing at NEI and you want to be courted by schools, and these NCAA programs are letting you walk by, it's not because they don't care about you. It's not because they're not impressed or they don't want to connect with you. They're not allowed to if you're going into your junior year. And I think that it's easy to make that mistake of like, well, this school, they came up and talked to us and those guys ignored us. They literally are not allowed to talk to you. If you're just coming out of your sophomore year and you are tearing up NAI 7s, be aware that a whole bunch of NCAA teams are not allowed to even just say hi. So I think that's really important for parents to remember when they're like, well, such and such a club team or an elevated club team came and talked to me. BYU came and talked to me. It's like, yeah, because they can do whatever they want.
So what happened if athletes, early in their sophomore year, and they're on a platform that has your contact information. They shoot you an email. They say, hey, I'm class of whatever it may be. You realize they're too young. Is there a response that you can at least give them, or is it really kind of radio silence for them where they're not getting a response at all?
There are times where I will talk to my compliance department and he'll allow me to say, we cannot communicate with you until this date. And that's it. We won't be able to say anything other than that.
Yep. No, and that's good. Just so, the athletes, wow, they really don't want me. Just so they understand, hey, there are rules and regulations. So what is the NCAA Eligibility Center and how does it pertain to you, if it does? And what the NCAA eligibility number?
So for us, the NCAA Eligibility Center pertains a ton to us. So we have to use that in order to see if a student is going to be eligible to participate in athletics during their college career. So to put it in short terms, because there's a lot of things you have to do. You register for an NCAA ID number. So you go in and you create an account. And for us, that's an academic and amateurism account. So there's a free account that you can go on and do. But for us, that won't work. D1, it has to be that one where you pay for, because they're going to start to evaluate your transcripts. And they're going to evaluate what classes are you in, what's your GPA. To be eligible for D1, you need a 2.3 GPA at least in all of your 16 core classes. And those 16 core classes are English, math, science, social studies, physical science. I got to look it up. I'm actually going to send you a link that you can have that is a whole NCAA prospective student athlete guide. And it's going to give you D1, D2, and D3 and all of the requirements. But we have 16 core classes that we have to make sure that has at least a 2.3 in to be eligible for that first year. So registering for that early is important, because if you do that freshman or sophomore year, you can start to see, am I hitting those core classes every year? Am I going to make the minimum to play at the level that I want to play at, D1, T2, or D3? And for us, we have to take your ID number and we have to put it on our IRL list, which is basically my institution recruiting list that allows me to say, I'm recruiting this kid. And they know that my compliance department knows that that's the communication I'm going to be having with that person in the NCAA Eligibility Center. Ashley, what did I miss?
No, that sounds great for Division I. I will share that happily I do not have to hold on to that IRL list. And so for Division III, if an athlete comes to us with an NCAA eligibility number already, that is fantastic. The Division III clearance process is much simpler. So getting your NCAA ID number, which is a free process for Division III, is just something that students complete as their general NCAA clearance process when they get to campus or before they get to campus, before they start playing rugby. So it's much simpler in terms of communication and that sort of a thing. we have far less rules and restrictions in Division III. So we can kind of talk to people via email. I always like when student athletes fill out a recruiting questionnaire, but it is different everywhere. But I think it's important to know that Eligibility Center is primarily for Division I and Division II. And for Division III, it's more about proving your amateur status as well as that you are a current student for that NCAA ID number.
Very interesting. Okay. And everyone on the call, real quick, going back to the information that both coaches said they're going to be sharing, they'll be sharing that with me, and I'll be sure to distribute that to everybody's email addresses that registered, so everyone will be getting that. But back real quick to the Eligibility Center. I know, Ashley, you said, they're really getting to that process when they're getting on campus. But for the D1 and D2, when should these athletes start that process?
So for the NCAA, we suggest freshman, sophomore year starting that process. Get a profile started so that you can start tracking the tasks that you need to do for your junior and senior year and what courses. And then for us, when it comes to contacting a D1 school, you can do that your sophomore year, but no, they're not going to respond. But you get on their radar, find the questionnaire, fill it out early, get on that recruiting database. And have your name out there. And then, if you know the dates, June 15th, send an email. Send an email to that head coach or assistant coach, or copy them both. And just to get, for us, or most D1, they want game film, so they want to see game film. They want to see, we get resumes. It's nice to have a well-written email. We know it sounds like you're a good student. So doing that early in the process, knowing that your junior year, you're really going to start to probably visit campuses and see what you want. And then senior year, the beginning of senior year is mostly when we try to make commits happen.
Okay. So when you're reaching out to players and they're eligible, you can reach out to them, everything lines up, they have everything they need. I mean, are you reaching out to players, parents, both? How does that work?
So for us, it's players. I want to reach out to the prospective student athletes. Parents will get involved in the recruiting process, and we will have calls with parents and the student. We will have them on campus, or we'll be visiting, or we'll talk to them on this, at the tournament after games. But for me, I want to communicate with the student because I want to know how they communicate. Are they reliable? Are they answering emails? Are they responding to me? It just gives me an idea of how they are as how they're going to be when they get to college as student athlete. So I want that communication between them. If a parent's copied or a parent's email, I don't mind, but it should be the student athlete for me.
Okay. And then with recruiting, with communication, are there certain dead periods or anything like that within NCAA and recruiting that you're not able to contact anyone at all?
For us, we have a dead period. I believe it's the second week in November. I think this year it's the 10th to the 14th, somewhere around those dates. It's the signing week for us. So it's the NLI signing week. So we have a dead period, which means I can't have any face-to-face contact during that week on or off campus. I can still communicate via email or phone calls. I just can't have face-to-face contact.
Okay. So we talked about NAI, if you're out there, you're not interrupting anything that, they're going until the end of the day. What about camps? Do you go to camps? Do you conduct camps? Are you part of other camps? How does it work in that recruiting process?
Ashley, you want to speak to this? Or
I was just going to say, we don't currently go to or host any, but we are scheduling several ID clinics. One for this fall and one for this spring, where students can come onto campus. Our coaching staff will run through some drills with them. We will have a recruiting session where we'll have somebody from admissions and that sort of thing. There are other coaches that do host camps and clinics, and there are various coaches that kind of attend certain things. I tend to go to a lot of things in New England, I think, as well as most coaches in New England tend to kind of follow those circuits. So it's here and there, kind of depending on your schedule. And I think that we were talking about earlier, sometimes the summer schedule with various tournaments and that sort of thing is a little bit wackier for us coaches, than the standard, season where you have a set schedule. But I think, I know for us, we're trying to get to as many things within our recruiting budget line as possible, as are all of those other NCAA coaches.
Okay. So what advice would you have for players and parents on this call that, to ensure that they remain compliant with the NCAA rules throughout this recruitment process?
I would say use the resources that we're going to give you to follow kind of those guidelines, just to see when we can have those contacts with them and with their daughters, and encourage their daughters to understand those rules as well. And don't be afraid to email the coach if they have a question. Like, it's not, I don't think it's very hard to follow the rules. They're mostly for us and controlling us, not the parents and the prospective student athletes. It doesn't hurt if they have a question, just to shoot an email or a text that we could possibly answer for them.
No, absolutely. It's got to be a little strange that with, for an athlete they're looking at the different schools and then, wait a minute, am I able to contact this one? How does this work? Because, and we'll talk about it later on in the presentation, there's so many different types of programs. And so it can get confusing, certainly, for the players. What am I missing? What other important pieces of information am I missing and not asking you?
I think the biggest thing is that in terms of communication, that I think students know that they can reach out at any time. They just might not get an answer. And as Coach Reed mentioned, most coaches do prefer that student to coach contact versus parent to coach contact. And most of the NCAA, I'm going to say that all of us have this, but there is a recruiting questionnaire on people's athletic department websites that you can go out and fill out, and you can put in your name, usually your GPA, what majors you're interested in. So might be good if you're looking at a particular school to make sure that you write majors that they actually have at that school. You can put in your level of interest, other activities that you're involved in, really just all of this information. And those emails generally go right to, if not the head coach, the assistant coach's email. So you can get yourself on their radar by just filling out one of those questionnaires at any time. And so even if you don't get a response, chances are they are logging that information, what your graduation year is, so that they know when they can start talking to you.
Okay, great advice. We'll pause here for questions. James, do we have any questions in the chat?
No, we have nothing right now.
No,
Okay.
Anybody who joined late, you can pop a question in the chat anytime, and we will try to address it. So don't be shy.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, here we go.
Film guy. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, any guidance on film is the question. How to send and what
How
to
much
send.
to send? Oh,
Yeah,
I don't know
how
if there
much
is
to
there is a limit. You want to see everything.
It is time for us to go through, right? It's hard, but if you have highlights, that's fine. I usually want to see at least one full game. We like to watch the whole game, where you're at, where's your positioning, where's your off ball movement, all that fun stuff that we do in rugby. So most Division I coaches want to see a whole game. Format wise, a lot of us will use Huddle or VO or other programs where you can send a link and we can watch them through that. Otherwise, I've also had the Dropbox. Like if we can't find a way, the Dropbox or we transfer, those sites have worked for us in the past. Ashley, how about you?
We're the same, generally we just get stuff sent to our email. I know for us, we generally just don't have the staff bandwidth to sit and watch full matches, but anytime that we can get more than just a singular highlight clip is really nice. So several minutes of play, hopefully an offensive to defensive transition, et cetera, et cetera. But, that's kind of what we look for. I think I also saw a question, sorry for disrupting the chat, monitoring about the resume, a rugby resume.
Yes.
I think should the resume focus on rugby experience?
Yeah, I think yes, if you want to play rugby, send a coach your rugby resume. But I will say that I think a lot of coaches also appreciate some of those other things that you might be interested in, as well as just some basic GPA information, interested major, anything that you can give to a coach that kind of paints not just who you are as a rugby player, but who you are as a student athlete, who you are as a person, does make a difference. I know that we'll talk about fit in a little bit, but I think important to kind of showcase yourself as a whole person and as a rugby player at the same time. So what things do you bring to the table in rugby, but what are those other components in your life that make you who you are?
100% agree. I want to know you as a person.
So we got
That's a great.
couple more questions in here.
Yeah, this is a great question. Does the fact that you're not playing sevens affect your chance of getting recruited?
No, we have student, we and other Division I teams have students that have only played sevens or only played 15s or maybe played both. And we know, most of our Division I teams will play both sevens and 15s. So you're going to be converted to either one, no matter if you're just playing 15s or sevens. But for the general purpose or population, it does not matter for us at this level.
Same.
Just need a rugby player, right?
Yes.
Right.
Student athlete. Yeah.
All right. So we have another question. What non-official and official visits? My daughter is between sophomore and junior year. What is the typical track for the timeline of visits?
So for us, and other D1, you're usually trying to get that spring of junior year. So that spring semester of junior year, you're trying to get some of those visits in, or the fall of their senior year. That's what I typically see throughout our Division I team programs. That's when those official visits will happen. And I suggest that you're doing it earlier. You do it that junior year, spring or fall if you can, so that you have more time to visit more universities to make a decision and to see what it looks like. So you can always come on campus for a non-official visit whenever you'd like. And then that official visit is going to be arranged with you and the coaching staff and paid for by that coach, by that university to get you there. Usually it's an overnight to stay with, stay on campus with the student athletes, see what it's like. But it can be a day as well.
Yeah. And so just wanted to echo what Michelle had said. So non-official visits are not tracked. So you can go and get an admissions tour. You can walk around the athletic facility. You can kind of pop by and say hello, but it will not be tracked. You are not able to really sit and have an in-depth meeting for that. The official visits, I kind of say rolling out the blue carpet. Michelle, maybe it's the red carpet for you guys, or perhaps black or yellow or green, depending on what school you're at. But those are the visits where, generally speaking, you'll spend a lot more time with the coaching staff. You might do an overnight visit where you spend time with the student athletes. You'll eat in the dining hall. So you'll really be using those official visits to get a feel of what it's like to spend a day at the school. Whereas your unofficial visit is, I feel like, in terms of the search process, is starting to narrow down those places that you might want to go on an official visit to.
Agree.
Okay. We have one other question that came in. We're going to talk about money and scholarships in a few more slides. So we can maybe get to this one once we get there.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's good.
All right. Student athlete essentials. So, Ashley, what do you recommend, for a high school student, when and how should they start promoting themselves to college coaches? So, do they start promoting themselves, freshman, sophomore year, even with highlights on social media, or do they get a full rugby resume together? What's your take on that?
So for us, I know that for our class of 2025s and 2026, so we usually start it lines up with our recruiting timeline. So just as they're finishing that sophomore year, we usually have a few names on our list. We may have had some students reach out to us at that point in time, but that's when we're really starting to go harder after some of those juniors just to get on their radar. So I always kind of recommend, and it's different for everybody because I think that everybody tries to figure out what it is that they're looking for in a school, and it can be super overwhelming. But I know I always try to starting to talk to people as they're entering their junior year and then really starting to make sure that I'm seeing them play, that I'm attending some of the tournaments that they may be at, and starting to perhaps pick up their frequency and some of that communication to hopefully get an official visit out of it. So I would say, and based on the NCAA recruiting guide, I tend to follow that. If people reach out their freshman year or even super, super early in their sophomore year, I'll make note of it, but I really won't start the communication back on my end until we're getting to the end of that sophomore year.
Okay.
Nope.
And then, what do you feel about with high school coaches? How can they support their players in the recruitment process?
So I've had, a lot of our D1 fellow colleagues will have, we build relationships with programs. High school coaches will know, we have some ones that we're familiar with, but even the ones that we're not familiar with, we'll call, send an email, with here are my seniors, these are their GPAs, this is the position they play. They're interested in your school, or they're interested in playing at the D1 level. So being proactive and just sending us the information that would help us, and if they feel comfortable sending like their emails to us, they can do that as well. But it gives us a chance to kind of get a snapshot on who's going to be graduating soon as juniors or seniors, and who we can speak to. And then having that conversation with the coach is always nice to talk to them. And as long as they're very transparent, being realistic too, because every coach wants their kid to go on and play at a high level or play it, but be honest about how that student athlete is, so that we can start that recruiting process knowing, kind of the platform, right?
Yeah.
Hey,
So
I'm sorry.
Nice
Sorry. Greg, a couple of new people jumped on. Just a reminder, mute yourself, because sometimes there's a bit of a feedback loop from what other people are saying comes back through your microphone, and everyone hears an echo. So.
Thank you, Alex. No, that's great information, Michelle.
Greg, I did want to say one thing too about when you were talking about when and how to promote yourself, and I agree with all of Ashley's statements. I do want to say too, if you're promoting yourself during our main fall 15 season, there may be a couple of weeks before an answer, just because we're so inundated with game every weekend and trying to get all that done. So there's no disrespect to our prospective student athletes. It's just sometimes our time is limited. We're at practice a couple hours a day. We're at strength and conditioning, and then we're meeting with student athletes. So just understand the timing and the year. The communication back might be at a different, delay or response.
Okay. Understood. So I know going into now the importance of high school academic performance, I know you said the minimum is 2.3, correct? In the 16 core curriculum, is that correct?
2.3 in the 16 core classes. Yep.
Core classes. Okay. So is there specific criteria that will increase a player's chance of receiving scholarships?
Academically, so if we're talking about the importance of academics, it is important for GPA. You don't need a 4.0. It's helpful, but having a higher GPA is going to get you more merit, more academic aid that you can then combine if you are in line to possibly receive athletic aid from a university. Then you could combine that together with your academic aid. So the more academic aid you get, right, hopefully that'll supplement whatever maybe athletic aid you might receive.
Okay, that makes sense. Now we talked about getting into school. What about academic requirements the student must maintain while they're enrolled in the school?
Ashley, did you have something before?
Well, I was just going to add, so Division III, and I think that this is also going to be on a later slide, but Division III, there are no athletic scholarships. They're predominantly merit-based scholarships. So higher GPA usually means more money at those Division III institutions. And I think another important thing that I think all coaches would agree with, your ability to balance your academic schedule and your rugby schedule and your extracurricular schedule as a high school student generally is a little bit reflective of how that transition into that first year of college goes. So your ability to demonstrate that balance, I think, usually goes a long way in the recruiting process as well, because college coaches don't want to have an individual meeting with players twice a week to make sure that they're going to class, that they're doing all these things. So if you can prove that you are a good student, I think it makes all the difference in the recruiting process, but also in that transition to that first year of college.
Excellent. Okay. And then the last bullet point here, just, some insights. What if an athlete isn't heavily recruited? What options do they have? I mean, can they come in, walk on? Are there a certain number of spots available to players? Or do you have roster limits? How does that work?
So for the D1 atmosphere, we have a thing called preferred walk-ons. So, we do have roster slots. So if they're not being highly recruited and they reach out, or they're not receiving an athletic aid offer, then they can come on as a preferred walk-on. We also have walk-ons that come on after the school has started. And, they might see rugby and reach out to one of the coaches, and they've been an athlete in something else, usually soccer or something like that. And they're trying to find a new sport. And so in my knowledge, I have even the most elite programs who still accept walk-ons, because honestly, most of us coaches were built on teams that were walk-ons. So we understand that the importance of spreading rugby is that if you have an athlete and someone's willing to work hard, you can teach them the sport, and then they're going to fall in love with the sport that you're in love with.
Right.
So walk-ons for us is if they don't get recruited, still go and talk to the coach, because most of the time we don't have a maximum. We as a coaching staff at Sacred Heart have a number that we don't like to go above, but missions wants us to go above, right? There's no maximum that I've heard of.
Okay.
I don't know about D2 or D3, coach have.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it also depends on what the student athlete might want, right? Because you might be able to walk onto a roster because some coaches might carry 55 or 60 people. So I think the question becomes, do you want to be a walk-on and be number 55 on a roster of 60? Or do you want to try to walk on to a roster that might be a little bit tighter? Do you want to take a chance to walk on if the coach kind of says, yeah, you can try to walk on, versus something like Coach Reed said, whereas we have these spots available. So I think it does differ. I do think at Division II and Division III, it's a lot of walk-ons. So we generally have 3 to 4 rugby recruits annually. And we have a lot of crossover athletes. And then I like to call happy surprises. So people that I might have been in contact with at some point that just might have never reached back out after trying to communicate with them. And then I get hey, coach, I'm coming to this school. And, it's a nice happy surprise for a roster addition. But
Right.
I think just, look at those things, look at roster size, So I think it does differ per school, but I do think that even the higher level Division I programs do have walk-on spots available.
Okay. No, that's great advice. And we're going to touch on some of that in a couple of slides too. So we're going to pause here for some questions. I know there's some in there.
Yeah, Greg,
go
first,
ahead, Alex.
first of all, I'm going to suggest we blow through slide 10 real fast, because I think compared to some of the other things people are asking about, we don't need to worry
You
about
got it.
We are going to talk about aid and financial stuff, so I'll leave Chris and Brian's questions to a little bit later. Greg's question: what effect does an injury have on the recruiting process, especially during a student athlete's senior year?
So that is a great question. It is very individualized to the program and the coaching staff. So I have to be careful, because I don't really want to talk about too much about us because of the violations, but every coaching staff has a different opinion to where, that offer may still stand. They understand that you're going to recover and you're going to come back, or you might have coaching staffs that say they pull that offer. They need someone that's being able to play right away. My suggestion is go and ask the coaching staff. You even if it hurts hearing something that you don't want to hear, talk to them and get their philosophy on it right away. Even if you're not hurt, ask that. Find out what their philosophy is. If I get injured and you've offered me, am I able to still come? What does that look like? Because they should, to me, my opinion is they should be transparent about that.
I would say generally in Division III, and what I will share is I brushed myself up on what the Division III philosophy is. And one of the things is that it's fueled by passion, which, I think is fantastic because there's no, athletic scholarships in Division III. Generally speaking, an injury that happens senior year does not have an impact on a roster spot. It just kind of delays your start being able to practice, on the field with the team and that sort of thing.
Perfect. I'm going to back up one quick question. So what is your recruiting position on international players where she attends a boarding school in New Zealand, so time is limited in the US despite being an American?
So we recruit internationals. I actually have, so most of our D1 teams have some form of international in their program. And there are recruiters who will reach out to us with internationals. It is harder for us to recruit internationals, but having a recruiter helps us. They give us the film, the resume and all of that. But you can still be recruited. We example, spoke to someone from New Zealand, a couple months ago. So we like internationals because they bring a different style of rugby. They bring knowledge. It's bigger usually in the country that they're at. So international, the D1 level is a good thing for us, and I think most of our coaches like having internationals on the team.
Okay. I would say the same thing with Division III. The thing Division III usually bumps up against is cost, because we don't have athletic scholarship to give. But I think for the most part, international students are always welcome and always encouraged to take part in the recruiting process.
Okay, perfect. All right, let's jump to time commitment. So, and I know this is speak in broad strokes here, I know, and it's going to be different possibly for divisions, but, what should high school players expect in terms of training, competition, team culture at the collegiate level?
So for D1, first off, I'm going to say team culture. You're hoping it's good no matter what level you're at, right? So D1, D2, D3, we're all working on a good team culture. You're always cultivating that. And in terms of how much time, so for me, it is a part-time job. It's 20 hours a week in season. So when we're in season, you're going to have 20 hours of rugby time. And those are certain activities. That's film, that's practice, that's strength and conditioning. There are certain activities that are counted towards those 20 hours. So you will be playing, watching, talking, team meetings, strength conditioning for close to 20 hours a week. Not everyone uses their 20 hours, but they have the limit of 20 hours a week. And then you have games, every weekend with a couple bye weekends here and there. When it comes to off season, it's 8 hours a week. So you have 8 hours a week of strength and conditioning and rugby skills that you can do during those 8 hours a week. For us, we, and most of the D1 programs, they also have study table hours that you're required to do. So, it's important for most of our teams. We believe in academics. We believe that, you're graduating with a degree. So your freshman year, you're coming in and most likely you're going to do study hours. If that's 6 hours a week or 8 hours a week, you need to understand that that's also going to be on top of 20 hours a week. And that's going to, go from the middle of August to the middle of November for your in season. And then when you're off season, like I said, 8 hours a week.
Okay. And how about you, Ashley?
So Division III, I would say very similar in terms of in season. I think most coaches are practicing between 4 and 5 days a week on field. And then generally mixing in some weightlifting sessions and then perhaps film. The coaches that I've spoken to in Division III tend to like to stack those sessions. So you might have a lift and then a field session, and then that day the field session might be shortened. So I think just stuff like that. But I think overall, in terms of in-season commitment, very similar. The rules are incredibly different for Division III out of season. So for instance, where Coach Reed was saying, 8 hours a week, my team has designated lifting times, and they do play pickup rugby. But I, as the head coach, am not allowed to monitor any of that. I am not allowed to mandate it. The off season is meant to be spent for the student athletes in Division III to use how they see fit. Now, obviously, I'm like, hopefully that includes lift and some touch and pickup rugby. But same thing in the summer. We have an app that our strength and conditioning coaches for team lifts. And, even though I actually have access to that, I don't check it because, I believe in that kind of philosophy. If I have an athlete that shows up day one of preseason, I'll know if they weren't following the program. So I would say very similar in season, with some exceptions, but very different out of season in terms of student athlete requirement.
There's an actual stat, a cool stat that shows between D1 and D3. Out of season, they asked the student athletes, do you spend the same amount of time or more on athletics out of season? For D1, it was 67%, and for D3, it was 47%. So that gives you a little bit of an idea.
But it's a daily training environment in season all through every division. And I think that's important for a player who is taking their rugby seriously. Even in Division 3, they can continue to train every day and play and practice every day and work on their rugby every day.
Right. But it's also, juggling, because you have to concentrate on your academics and you have 20 hours of rugby. So, does an NCAA rugby player, do they get like preferred scheduling of classes, preferred housing? Do you moving in dates or moving in early? Are there certain things that they'll get to help plan around those 20 hours and make it easier to schedule?
Yeah, we'll get preferred class. So if you're a sophomore, you're going to register before all the sophomores. Now, universities each do it a little bit differently. So I'm just speaking a little bit to what I've seen at the universities that I've been at. So they will get priority registration just to make sure they can work around practice on field. And then I just lost my train of thought with the next part of that question.
Well, for also moving in, preferred housing, different things just to make it a little bit easier as they're getting their feet, wet at school.
Some schools will have housing for athletes and other schools won't. So that really depends on what the school's philosophy is with athletic housing. But most people who have preseason, you'll get preferred early move-in to your residence hall because you're going to be there for preseason at the D1 level.
And you did say they're mandatory, like study groups or study halls, so new students have to be in there. So it's going to help them, balance both the rugby and the academics.
It teaches them how much time they have to spend on academics because they're used to being in class every day. They're used to being a little bit more spoon-fed some of that, paperwork and stuff. So this teaches you, now you have a 2-hour break. Let's go get my study hall hours in. Let me actually study. And it gives you a reality check about how much you're probably going to be studying throughout your college career.
And I believe, Michelle, that's an NCAA requirement at D1, correct? Because it's an NCAA requirement at D3 where we have like one of our academic liaisons has to track the first year study hall hours.
Oh, wow. That's good. All right. So we'll end this one with a couple of questions for this slide. Go ahead, Alex.
Our questions remain about money. If we skip the next slide and go into the next one, we can talk all about that.
Well, there was 2 at the end, but
sorry.
Playing other sports and not just focusing on rugby, would it be bad for me if I wrestled during the winter, and would it affect any type of recruitment for rugby?
So for general, when I talk to a lot of my colleagues, multi-sport athletes are great. They bring other skills in. Wrestlers specifically bring good contact and good tackling. So most of my colleagues are not opposed to multi-sport athletes. And it's a less of a burnout. That's the way I see it.
I think that I don't want to get into my personal philosophy too much. Yeah. But I think that across the board, rugby, generally there's a lot of crossover athletes in it. And I think all of the skills that come with those other sports bring value to rugby. And, and like Coach Reed said, talking to other coaches, I think it only benefits the athlete really, and it continues to have you practice that balance of academics and athletics throughout the school year versus kind of having a hard start and stop.
No, I agree 100%. And as a high school coach, I wish a lot of the coaches of the other high school sports in my area felt the same way, that, the benefits that rugby bring to those sports, because it really does. And it's, we all know it. We're just trying to get that message out.
Yeah.
All right, let's jump into the next slide. Alex, this is the one that you said you wanted to go through real quick.
We don't even need to talk about it.
All right, let's
we
go
don't have
through.
time. Financial incentives is the thing we want to talk about, and we want to talk about the fact that when you hear the word scholarship, you have to keep in mind that that can mean anything. That could mean $25. That could mean all your tuition is paid, or $50. So it's a very loaded question, and I think that sometimes parents, families, players get caught up in the idea of, well, I'm going to a college on a rugby scholarship. Yeah, but you might be going to another school and pay a lot less just because, maybe it's a Catholic school and you go to the same branch of Catholicism, Christian Brothers or Jesuit school. And so because you have a certain grade point average, bam, you get 10 grand off the top. Right. That's great too. So we do have a couple of questions, but I just want everybody to be aware, like, if you go to the service academies, it's paid for. You don't have to worry about it. If you go to certain colleges with multi-billion-dollar endowments, if you don't reach a certain income level, you're just going there for free. So again, don't have to worry about it. But not every school is like that. And I think that a couple of the questions, coaches, what kind of money or scholarships are available for student athletes with a high GPA for D1 schools, for some of these Ivy League programs. And I think the other question is more from the coaches' side. Brian came in saying, what kind of expectations can high school coaches manage with their players and their families in terms of financial support? What financial support is out there? Because parents are going in going, can she get a scholarship? And it's like, so take it away.
Yeah, and that's a great question. I mean, 'cause me as a high school coach, I get that all the time. And my first response is, look, I don't know of, and there may be somewhere, a full ride for rugby. It really just doesn't exist very often. But it doesn't mean you can't build a composite of very good things. And we're going to talk about different ways to get money, based on, and that's what we're always pushing your GPA, being involved, leadership, all these different things that can help get different types of scholarship, that you put that whole package together, that it also includes that rugby piece, turns into a really nice package. I mean, and I know just from experience from my son, James, who, went to Mount St. Mary's. Yeah, he got a rugby scholarship, a nice chunk, but he also had to build other things onto that. He did well in school, so they did a lot more on top of it. He did other things where they, put more on there. And then you put that whole package together and it's like, wow, that really looks good. So it's all different pieces that you're putting together. So one of them, that we can talk about, let me get this back to this. Where is it? Is merit scholarships. This is one that we're just talking about. Scholarship money that you can receive for just several things, like, GPA, for instance, or a high test score. And they could also be, character-based awards, things like leadership, community service. A lot of times these awards are higher amounts than rugby scholarships, but when used, again, with combining your total package of awards, it's a big chunk. So when, a student athlete qualifies for these types of awards, for example, the GPA, it also helps the rugby programs potentially find additional opportunities that might be out there. So they might say, hey, I do know of another scholarship that is available for students with, above this GPA, and they can help you in that aspect as well. So merit scholarships could really, help increase that whole package.
And they're not just provided by the university. You might have to do some research and look for someone, someone from a certain part of the country, or like you said, a certain kind of school, or maybe your parents worked in a certain industry and there's something there. So, or a certain kind of major. So go ahead, coaches.
There's a good website I tell recruits is goingmary.com, and it's a scholarship financial aid website. Put all your information in and it'll pull up stuff that you might qualify for.
That's great.
Goingmary.com.
Goingmary.com. That's good.
And we'll send that out also when we send all the other information. Next, of course, athletic scholarship, pretty straightforward. These are scholarships offered based strictly on your rugby talent. Again, full athletic rugby scholarships are few and far in between. So these can range from a couple $100s to thousands of dollars. But it varies by program and it varies by budget. And you'd be very surprised. I mean, it doesn't just mean NCAA gives scholarships. There are varsity programs that give scholarships. There's clubs that even give scholarships. So there are some available, but again, it's going to really vary.
So D1, for just so it in NCAA, rugby teams are allowed to have 12, the equivalent of 12 full rides of money, but that's up to the university on how much of that money you get. So you're going to get a university that might get only one full ride, or they're going to have 10, or they're going to have 9. It is dependent on the university. Even though the NCAA says you can have 12, it's dependent on what that university can afford or decides to give to that rugby program. And then with the Ivy Leagues, so I think someone asked about that. There are no scholarships. There are spots. There's admission spots. And so you have to either get into the university, or you're granted an admission spots through athletics. But like he's talking about, all your aid is going to be built up by other things, not athletic aid.
Fortunately, they have a lot of money in the bank. Alternative scholarships. And this is something where, they might, some universities provide like in-state tuition to out-of-state students, or students from specific other states, things like that. We talk about go to goingmary.com and find scholarships that are provided by a foundation, or something that you have to do your research and apply for it over and above. Now, the U.S. Rugby Foundation, usrugbyfoundation.org, provides several scholarships. Some are school specific, some are not, but they have scholarships. Now, what is a scholarship there? Some of those are like $1,000. I think one's $7,500, which is not nothing. That's pretty good. So you check in the U.S. Rugby Foundation, because every year they take applications, and it's boys and girls, and they're pretty equal in terms of who they award to. So that's a really good source just to check in as well, that you might actually get a rugby scholarship just from a different rugby organization. And there are other foundations out there. There's the Women's Rugby Foundation. I don't know really what they do on that. I think they're more in the elite level. But where I live in Ohio, there's the 1964 Foundation. And there are other rugby foundations out there that might be worth a look.
Someone did just ask about Ivy League spots. In general, from what I've heard, it's anywhere from 1 to 2 to 8, but it's dependent on the university.
And it can flex from year to year as well. So one year they might get 5, and then the next year they might get 2 or 3.
Okay. Greg, did we get Teresa's question here about camps and S&C?
Oh, yep. Jump it. Yeah, if you can read that one.
So this is a question. Would you expect your recruits to have spent time at some of these camps, or with an S&C coach, or on a select side, an elite team, travel team, or is it just good enough for them to be a really good high school rugby player?
Most of our D1 coaches don't have, I think, expectations of camp. We know that everyone can't afford to go to camp, or it's not in their area or region to go to a USA camp or go to NIRA or whatever they might be wanting to do. If you can, that's great. But if you can't, then you use all your local resources. You're good high school coach. You do, the training you could do at your high school. As long as you're working to better yourself as an athlete and your rugby skills, that's going to be fine. It's really your hard work and what you do, not where you go for that. Ashley?
I would say the same thing. No expectation, but I would just say, particularly in the realm of strength and conditioning, that is a benefit to you as the athlete, regardless of sport, regardless of division. When you do get to college, you will have a strength and conditioning program. So that transition into that program might be, I don't want to say painful, might be a lot less difficult if you've had some experience, right, with some basic Olympic lift movements or with barbell exercises and that sort of a thing. So I would say that that there's not really an expectation, but those kinds of things, I guess anything that you could add to your athletic toolbox is always going to benefit you in that transition.
Going with the lowest Bronco time you can get.
Right.
And then the final one on the financial incentives is the need-based financial aid, federal, state money that helps pay, grants, scholarships, work studies, subsidized student loans. So that's a lot of the stuff that you find on the FAFSA and then stuff that, through the state. So those are the main financial incentives.
You will find too that even at the D1 level, people students can do work study. They can time manage and find a way to do work study, even community service. There are enough hours in the week to figure it out.
And a lot of work study jobs, you get to
Do
some schoolwork as well, which
Yep.
is nice. So
Oh,
use
nice.
those work study dollars.
Right.
All right.
So finding the right fit, and
yeah.
real quick, this is not just, so this is any rugby program, right? You want to find the right fit for you. So this kind of goes all across the board. So Alex, why don't you jump in with loving rugby?
Hey, look, yeah, that's the thing. You do love rugby, and you're all coming in to this webinar thinking about playing rugby at a higher institution. But what happens if you could never play rugby again? And you do have to think about that. You have to love the institution you're going to. Is it the right, kids talk about big school, small school, rural, urban, the right kind of major, the right kind of vibe. What's the social life like? What are the other things that you love to do? You have to love all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't love it and you get hurt, look, let's say you're hurt just for a season and you can't play for a season. And then you look around and say, I'm really not happy here. That really makes it hard to be there, especially if you're spending money. So really think about the institution you're looking at and be critical of it and be thoughtful of it when you're going to deciding where to go, and try to take rugby out of that equation, at least in part of your decision making. Competition. This is very important, and I think this is a really easy one for the most part in NIRA, because you know who they're playing.
Yeah.
NIRA teams are playing NIRA teams. And you're allowed to play outside of NIRA like twice. Is that right? Twice, 2 games or a game and a sevens tournament. So you're going to have a schedule and you're going to see who they're playing, but still look at their schedule, look at who they played last year. All of these teams have websites with their schedule from the previous years and see who are they playing and what are those scores looking like. And if you're comparing it to, say, a club team, sometimes you'll be very careful of a team like a club team that has the same score every week. That's like 28-0 or 21-0 or 20-0, and it's always the same like every other week. That means they're forfeits. That means they didn't actually play. So you have to be really mindful of that. And that's what's so great about the NIRA aspect is everybody's coming to play. So just be aware. You could also be like, well, they were 1-6 last year. Okay, but who are they playing? Mm-hmm. Are you playing Navy and Army and Dartmouth every year? Playing Sacred Heart? Or, that's a pretty good schedule. That's pretty awesome. So the fact that your team didn't do very well, maybe you can be the catalyst to be great. Or are you playing, even in Division 3, you look at what they're building now in the Northeast in Maine, it's pretty amazing. So, and what they're able to play. So whether they're winning or losing, it might be more important that they're playing.
Yep. And let's see. Ask coach questions. So when you have a Zoom call, whether the coaches, the administrators, or a recruiter, make sure you ask a lot of questions. Don't just answer their question. It's a two-way street. You want to find out as much about them as they are of you. So, find out, as much as you can about the coach, the programs, the other coaches. How long have they been coaching at the school? Where were they in the past? Have they jumped around a lot? If they have, why is this school the right fit? How many teams do they have? How many players do they have? Does each side play meaningful games each weekend? Some programs have their second and third sides play entirely different competitions, or they play a different schedule than their first side. It's going to give you an idea that, are you going to be playing if you're not in that first 23? Will you have rugby to play? Parents, it's also time for you to ask questions. Does the team have mandatory study groups? Does the coach have access to students' grades? We know on the NCAA, yes, they're going to get that information, but what about other teams? And are they notified if a player is failing or in jeopardy of failing? What kind of communication does the team have with parents? Is there a parent group that kind of disseminates that information about games each week? Maybe where your daughter is going to be playing on that roster any given weekend. This is a little one, but are the games live streamed? You have players that come across country to play rugby. Parents can't get to games all the time. They want to see. Some of these questions may not be deal breakers, but it's just good information to know before getting on campus. And let's see. Have an academic goal in mind. Do you have a specific major? Academics is the first priority, and let that guide you to your rugby program. Look for programs that offer what you're looking for. If you're using the Next Phase Rugby platform, you can search by majors and see if a school offers what you need. And what if your goal is, I don't know just yet? And that's okay. A lot of people don't. I don't think I declared a major until my senior year. But that's okay. But just be sure the school you go to that you're interested in offers you enough options that you're able to explore. So we'll stop real quick with a few more. Any other questions?
This is an interesting question from Selena. Are there other schools expected to transition to NCAA D1 soon? And how would a player find out about that information? As far as I'm concerned, as far as I know, it's all very secret and very hush-hush until it all happens. I did mention, I did a video where I started putting the screws to a few schools on the West Coast that rhyme with Blandford and UCLA, but that's just me. That's just me lighting a fire under them. That's not really a hint or anything like that.
We appreciate that advocacy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't think we can say anything there, can we, coaches?
No, Alex, you're right. I mean, we, Ashley and I are chairs for NIRA, and we don't even know until it's happening.
Right.
I think I'll share. I think the Thomas College announcement, like somebody sent it to me, and I was like, wow.
Right. Lindenwood's coach, Trevor Locke, did not know until it was a done deal.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
It's really on a school administrative level.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'll just share too, so I talked about the NCAA rules that we all have in common within NIRA. So the NCAA schools, the other thing is that we are athletic department backed. So you have generally full-time coaches, full-time athletic training. You have academic support staff, strength and conditioning. You have all of these things. So when you think about all of the things that need to align for the university to press go on the addition of a new program, it makes sense that, they're very cautious about who knows and who doesn't know. But I just wanted to clarify that as well. Make sure that people are aware of that, all of those things that come with the NCAA schools.
That's great information. Thank you. All right, so we've come to the end. So just want to say thank you again to USA Youth and High School Rugby for allowing us to host this event. A big thank you to our special guests, Coach Michelle Reed of Sacred Heart University and Coach Ashley Potvin-Fulford from University of New England. You were both great. Some awesome information you shared with us. We really appreciate it. And thank you all for joining us today. We hope to see you at our next webinar. If you have any questions after this, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. My email is right there, greg@nextphaserugby.com, and I can disseminate questions to our panel if necessary. And if they can answer them, of course, they will send them back. If they can't, I'll let you know it's something that, maybe they can't answer. And we will also be getting that information that we talked about throughout the presentation out to you, hopefully in the next couple of days. Thank you all again.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you,
everybody.